Welcome to Debt Matters. Today, we're zeroing in on uh, something pretty fundamental in B2B risk management, the personal guarantee.
Yeah.
I mean, if your business offers credit terms, you're providing goods or services up front, well, there's always that risk the buyer won't pay. And the material we've been reviewing really focuses on this specific tool, the PG, designed to, lessen that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal today is pretty straightforward, really. We want you, the listener, to get a solid handle on what a B2B personal guarantee actually is, but not just the idea of it. We're talking the nitty-gritty, the documentation rules that make it stick, make it valid, and what happens when you actually need to enforce it.
Right, because I think a lot of people, a lot of credit folks sort of see the PG as just ticking a box. Director signs, job done, you're covered. But it's really not that simple, is it? The value isn't just having the signature, it's all in the legal details, the wording.
Exactly.
So let's know we unpack that. Why is the PG such a cornerstone for B2B credit?
Okay, so it really boils down to liability. A personal guarantee, at its core, it's a separate contract. It sits alongside the main business debt. And it brings in a third party, the guarantor, that's usually, a company director, maybe an owner. And this person agrees, personally, to cover the company's debt if the company itself defaults.
Ah, okay. So the liability isn't automatic. The company pays first.
Correct.
The individual only steps in if things go wrong with the company's payment. It's conditional.
That's the perfect word for it, conditional liability. The guarantor only becomes liable when a specific event happens, usually defined right in the contract. Typically, that trigger is the main debtor, the company failing to pay its bills, maybe missing payments, or even facing bankruptcy.
So practically speaking, then, why do creditors bother? I mean, if a company seems solid, why push for the owner to put their own assets on the line? Seems like it could be a tough sell sometimes.
Well, solid can be temporary, right? Especially with newer businesses or smaller ones. PGs offer this extra layer of security. It's particularly useful when you're dealing with companies that maybe don't have a long track record or, frankly, don't have many assets in the company name. So if that company does hit trouble, maybe insolvency, the PG can turn what might have been a lost business debt
Into something you can pursue personally against the director.
Precisely. It becomes a personal responsibility, potentially recoverable from their own private wealth. Think of it like a safety net against the company just disappearing.
That really clarifies his role. It's like insurance against the corporate structure failing. Okay, but you mentioned earlier, and the materials really stress this, that documentation is where these things often fall apart. So let's dig into that. What's the number one thing people miss?
Right. The absolute foundation, beyond just getting it signed, is clarity, crystal clear documentation. And probably the biggest failure point we see, certainly in disputes, is ambiguity around the scope of the liability.
Okay, scope. I think this is really where the devil's in the details, like you said. A guarantee for one specific order versus everything forever. Huge difference.
Massive difference. And this is where we need to talk about specific guarantees versus continuing guarantees.
Yeah.
A specific guarantee, it covers just one defined debt, maybe a single loan, or say one shipment worth $50,000. Once that specific debt is paid off, the guarantee is effectively done, finished.
Wow. So picture this. A small business signs a PG 5 years back. Maybe they owed $20 K then. Now they owe $500,000. If that initial PG was poorly worded, a court could say it only covered the first $20. Leaving the creditor short nearly $500,000 they thought was guaranteed?
That's exactly the kind of scenario that happens. Ambiguity is incredibly costly for the creditor. And that ties right into the next key point, defining the trigger. What exactly makes the company in default so you can go after the guarantor?
Right. When does the condition kick in?
Precisely. Is it 30 days past the due date? 60 days? Does it require a formal written demand first? Or only upon bankruptcy? It needs to be spelled out, no room for interpretation.
It feels like the entire burden here is on the creditor to get it perfect, even though it's the guarantor who might be trying to avoid paying later on.
That's generally how the law views it, yes. It's spot on, because making someone personally liable for a company's debt is a big deal. It pierces that corporate veil. And since the creditor usually writes the agreement, the courts tend to resolve any unclear language in favor of the guarantor.
So if you wrote it badly,
you, the creditor, wear the consequences. The court assumes the individual only agreed to the least burdensome interpretation of your fuzzy wording. Your drafting mistake costs you, not the director.
Okay, so precision is paramount. And that precision can't just be about the main debt amount, can it? Collections aren't free.
Oh, absolutely not. Good documentation has to go beyond the principle. It needs language that explicitly gives the creditor the right to recover interest that's accrued. And, crucially, all the costs and expenses tied to collecting the debt legal fees included.
And if that clause about costs and fees isn't in there, what happens? You win the main debt case against the guarantor, but you're stuck paying your own lawyers.
That's a very real possibility. If those extra costs aren't specifically included within the scope of what the guarantor promised to cover, you might only get the original debt amount back. You could be significantly out of pocket for the whole enforcement effort, which can be long and expensive. It's a surprisingly common miss in standard PG forms.
Okay, let's shift to enforcement itself. This is the moment of truth, right? Where the PG either works or it doesn't. And based on everything we've just discussed about documentation, the whole enforcement path really just tests that initial paperwork.
That sums it up perfectly. Your ability to actually use the PG to enforce it successfully in court hinges entirely on it being legally solid, valid, enforceable. If any of those key pieces are missing or flawed, the scope isn't clear, the trigger event is debatable, maybe even the signature is disputed, well, enforcement gets really tough. You could be looking at long court battles or maybe finding it's just impossible to enforce at all.
So let's say the company defaults. The trigger condition is met according to the contract. What does pursuing the individual actually look like? Is it just like chasing any other debt?
It's quite different, actually. You're switching tracks. You're no longer just dealing with a corporate entity which has its own rules for insolvency and winding up. Now you're pursuing an individual's personal assets. The first steps might look similar: demand letters, maybe filing a lawsuit. But executing that judgment, actually collecting against the guarantor, requires specialized legal know-how.
Why specialize?
Right,
Because
yeah.
you're going after personal stuff like houses or savings.
Exactly. You're relying solely on that specific PG contract to, as we said, pierce the corporate veil. That means understanding things like which personal assets can legally be seized. Are there homestead exemptions protecting their primary residence? How do you navigate personal financial disclosure rules?
It's not the same as garnishing a company bank account.
Not at all. It's a different legal landscape. The PG is a precision tool, and enforcing it needs equally precise legal execution.
So the ultimate power really is making that director or owner pay the company's debt out of their own pocket from assets they probably thought were safe behind the company structure.
Yes, that's the power. Assuming the documentation holds up under scrutiny. Which brings us back to a really critical question for any business using PGs. If this level of perfect legal wording is needed for a PG to actually work when tested in court, how many standard B2B credit applications truly meet that standard? Especially when they're often handled quickly, maybe by sales teams, not lawyers.
Yeah, that sounds like a major operational gap, a real vulnerability.
It can be. The reality on the ground often doesn't match the legal requirements.
It sounds like businesses need to audit not just the PG form itself, but the whole process. How it's filled out, who explains it, how it's stored.
Definitely. The audit needs to check. Is the continuing nature absolutely clear? Or are the default triggers totally unambiguous? Remember, any wiggle room you leave gives the guarantor a potential defense later on.
So wrapping this up, what's the key takeaway for you, our listener? It seems the real value of a personal guarantee isn't just having one signed. It's entirely in the execution, the specific wording of that contract. If you treat the documentation like a minor detail,
That protection could just evaporate the moment you actually need it, when that customer defaults. And building on that, if we agree that a PG is this special kind of contract where the risk of bad wording falls squarely on the creditor, well, that prompts a practical question for you. Think about your current standard credit agreement, your standard PG form. Which specific parts should you be reviewing right now? Are you absolutely certain the language guarantees future debts, not just current ones, with total clarity? Is that precision truly there? That's where applying this knowledge really starts to matter for your business.